Hi, and welcome to another episode of Steelfur Speaks. Once again, returning to our still scheduled on Tuesday, and obviously catch it either at lunch or later on. Right before expectations. On the topics of discussion today, we're obviously going to be talking about the ProQuest metagame. I have recently done my first ProQuest. Get this volume up. Apologies to people who just joined and it started off a little quiet, but let's get the volume up a bit high. So, I recently did my ProQuest. I Victor in Insane Stavros. It was and that was fun. It was fun. It was a good event, to be honest. I had fun. I think first game Reinar, second game KO, third game Victor, fourth game Prism, fifth game Victor. But ProQuests in the UK are always a bit funny because, in the room you've got Pro Tour champion Matt Hawks, you've got 3 UK national champions, you've got people who've top 8'd at callings, won callings, all those kind of things. So in terms of like the competitive landscape at my local RTN, out of those 32 people, about 7 or 8 of them have won a major event either on a national scale. So that's kind of the field that you're going into. So when I say my round 4 was a victor, really my round 4 was former national champion. My round 5 was former Pro Tour champion. You don't really stop being a Pro Tour champion, do you? But you get the idea. So those were good games, and I almost won, which kind of gave me a lot of confidence for the fact that I haven't been playing that much recently, but that those felt like kind of tight games with interesting interplay. The only game I was really unhappy with actually was the first game against Reinar, and that's just because personally I feel like I used Civic Steps wrong. Well, I don't feel like it. I objectively used Civic Steps wrong because my misuse of Civic Steps led to me getting swing bigged twice on one turn, and then led to me getting punished with a Savage Feast on another turn. So I definitely mistimed Civic Steps and probably gave my opponent a free 18 damage that game by using Civic Steps. That was just a massive learning for me. Obviously, KO doesn't have as big a punish for Civic Steps because he often has agility anyway. But Reinar obviously doesn't get action points as easily, and therefore there's a much bigger punish coming through from Civic Steps, especially on those Blood Rush Bellow turns when you do want the extra armor, but you obviously can't justify having the extra armor. So that was my experience. I'm very happy with Victor. He just feels like such a fun hero. I said it during the pre-release season. Obviously, I didn't play the RTN season, but I said it during the pre-release season. Clash is a really fun mechanic. I like it in both the visceral, when I send it and I don't know what's going to happen, I really enjoy that question mark about what's going to happen. And then I also really enjoy the other side of it, which is the late game. I know what these clashes are going to do. And one of the main ways that the Victor matches went for me and against me is that the first Victor match, I successfully stacked all of my trounces into this really sort of powerful position where it was like trounce, pulverize, golden sun, winning both and getting these huge goals and golds and things. And then the second game, I just had really bad hands, so it was really hard for me to stack trounce effectively. They just kept getting stuck with like Rouse the Ancients and stuff because of I had to keep pressure up because of how the game was going, but I couldn't take the pressure off and stack. It just wasn't lining up. And every single time these things came together, they came with a blue that I didn't want there or something like that. I just couldn't stack them the way I wanted to. So it was a bit frustrating. And whereas my opponent got the stacks, and then like late game he won 2 test of strengths, 2 trounces, and that was kind of all they wrote for that problem. So, but it was good. So it's like I went 3-3. I feel like, to be honest, the Reinar was good, but he went 1-3 after that. So I feel like I could have taken him if I hadn't misused Civic Steps. I also feel like Victor into Reinar is not a terrible matchup. You run D-reacts, you run a lot of block. You run disruption. I feel like it's a decent enough matchup. Probably harder than KO just because of the intimidate setup and how that can break through your defensive strategy. But I also just misplayed it badly. And then I feel like my games, so my other two losses then were Prism and a Victor Mirror. I've already kind of talked about the Victor Mirror. The Prism game, I feel like was potentially winnable, but I was definitely on the back foot the entire game. He opened on turn 0, his turn 0, with a Genesis and a Passing Mirage. So obviously I had to kill the Passing Mirage. Arguably I could have killed the Genesis, but I really did think I had to kill the Passing Mirage, and that turned out to be a good call because the next turn he tried to double herald me, and I popped both. And then after that, obviously, I just spent turns and turns clearing up his auras, but he did have a lot of time to get those angels and things like that. And then he had a double merciful turn off two libraries and all this other stuff. And then he got not two tomes, but then he also got library on turn 4. So basically, from turn 4, I've had 2 turns where I've cleared up, Passing Mirage and Genesis. I've had 1 turn I've had to clear up an Arclight Sentinel, and then he's got the library and he's got a 5-card hand for the next 10 turns of the game. And even with all that, I still got him down to 6. He did heal up to 10, but I did get him down to 6, and I did exhaust his soul, and I was keeping, he couldn't loot me because I had time skippers. So I was effectively doing it, and I'd made this decision just not to run Null Rune because I hadn't been practicing the Prism matchup that much. And I kind of replaced my Null Rune boots on my list with Tide Skippers, but didn't think about bringing in Null Rune gloves, which I should have done because I lost a lot of damage to Arcane and eventually died to Arcane. So that was just all a learning, but the Prism versus Victor matchup doesn't feel that bad as Victor. Like, it feels somewhat uphill because of how they're playing, but your hammer kills angels, your go again kills angels. You can just run time skippers for free action points to stop them ever looping you easily. Like all this kind of stuff does come together to make it quite an interesting matchup. We can see, like, and just in terms of meta, like, my meta was heavily favored towards Victor Prism. We did have Azaleas. We had a few KOs. We had a Kasai or so at the top tables. I think we had a Kano at the top tables as well. It might even have been won by a Kano. But I think it was won by a Kano, which is quite funny, who beat Prism. But it's just kind of interesting, isn't it? We've got 5 heroes taking, I'll say 10 plus wins. It's quite a substantial number of wins. And we've got kind of another 5 heroes taking, another 6 heroes taking 5 to 8 wins, which is still quite a decent amount. And then, a few heroes taking 4 wins. And, like, that's a good number. I mean, I don't think it's like, LSS Carol has been tweeting out, 20 heroes have taken wins. I don't think the meta is that wide, but it is kind of fun that you've got, 5 heroes at the top, and then maybe another 5 or 6 at the mid, like tier 2 level. And then there are other people winning. That is still fun that there are other people winning, because it shows that you could show up on Riptide or Levy or Dash and still hope to at least be in with the chance to win based on what was going on. But, like, if you're a specialist on Katsu or Bolton or Dorinthia, you're happy with this because it just means, other Dorinthias have won. Are you fighting uphill against these 5 best decks? Sure, but you're still good. I mean, it's still fun, isn't it? And then if you look at the top 8 splits, what's this top 8 from? I get this. What's this from? It just says 1 of everything. This is talking about a specific... Oh, this is from Battle Hard in San Francisco. Okay, that makes more sense. I thought this was from the ProQuest season. That's my mistake, but it's still quite good because, I mean, that means all these people showed up, and this is the win breakdown. Okay, that does change my opinion slightly because, like, it means the Riptides and the Dashes are at the bottom tables taking wins off other people, whereas these heroes rise to the cream of the crop. Whereas if this was a ProQuest win chart, I would be a lot more positive about it. But 8 different heroes in the finals of the tournament is pretty good. It really is pretty good. These are our ProQuest prizes. I haven't won anything yet, sadly, tragically. That's all right. I've got another chance this weekend. It just feel like a really good meta. It feels like there's a lot of interesting heroes doing a lot of interesting things. Like, Prism is there doing illusionist stuff, but it doesn't feel like it's untouchable or degenerate or unfair. It feels counterable as long as you plan for it and tech for it. KO is there doing like some crazy blowout turns, but again, they're not every turn. They do feel counterable. Azalea can just smack and dominate you, which does feel a little unpleasant. Especially if you can line up just like 2 dominate turns for 20. There are some counters in running defense reactions, but you obviously need to get those in Arsenal. If there's no breathing room for that, it can be a bit tricky. Victor is like a good fair deck. His clash cards can sometimes give him above rate stuff, but like ultimately I feel like he's just playing Guardian quite a fair way because he doesn't have Dominate. Kasai also feels very fair. All these other decks except Kano feels very fair. I'm not going to get into a Kano rant, but safe to say I continue to just not be happy with how Kano is playing. That's ProQuest season. I think it's going well. From what I'm seeing, a lot of other people agree it's going well. In terms of what else is going on, just so like in my own life, I just got back from a trip to Philadelphia. So, if you like Philadelphia, I've been there. I was staying in the seasons because I was visiting Comcast in my main job. Also, hilariously, I might actually end up being on the radio this Wednesday on a consumer rights show. So, if you're interested in consumer rights, I'll be talking about how the growth of technology in the public awareness has raised the expectations on customer service to a much higher standard than the industry can actually currently deliver. Because basically, we're in a situation where ChatGPT is basically let's not say basically, but ChatGPT is demonstrating a capability to generate answers that are detailed and complex about technical issues. And a lot of people are saying, well, why can ChatGPT do that, but the chatbot that you have on your website can't talk to me like I'm a human being or understand what I'm saying? Or why that automated system can't do can't do the same thing. And the simple answer is that, to get a good response from ChatGPT one time is luck, and to get it 10,000 times is unlikely. So when you're building a customer service system, you can't build one that, runs just on ChatGPT the way it is. You have to build one that's going to produce the same result 10,000 times, even if it's asked the same question in 10,000 different ways. There's a lot of security and trust that has to go into actually building these customer service solutions. There's a hilarious example recently by Air Canada where a guy, it was hilarious or tragic, but a guy was basically arranging a bereavement flight home for his father, so shipping the coffin home, and he was talking to a chatbot on Air Canada's website, and they basically told him that it was free, and then they tried to charge him for it, and they went to the judge, and the judge said, and they said to the judge, we're not responsible for what our chatbot says. And the Canadian judge quite correctly laughed at them and said, actually, no, you are entirely responsible. The chatbot said, you built it. It doesn't do anything spontaneously. It doesn't have free will. It doesn't decide to lie to your customers. You designed all of the model that goes into it. Therefore, you have to honor the terms that it created. And that's exactly why we're in this situation. But I'm going to talk about that more on Wednesday on the BBC. If you're interested, ping me a direct message. I can send you. But I just feel like it's interesting to talk about, like, I do this podcast for fun and I talk for fun, but it is also actually valuable practice for the processes and things that I do in my real job, because obviously I speak on stage a lot, I present a lot, I talk a lot to people. And now, of course, I'm going on the radio. And I would say that if I didn't do this podcast on a regular basis, my confidence in terms of presentation, clarity of speech, and ability to just talk to a large number of people at one time would be a lot worse. So, if you're thinking about your own podcast, or whether you want to do it, or whether there's ulterior reasons you don't want to do it, or you're scared and things like that, I will just say that repetition breeds confidence. I have been a public speaker since I was 15. I used to do Model United Nations. If you don't know what it is, look it up. It's very fun, but basically you pretend to be a country at the United Nations and you're given a brief and you're given a panel to speak on. I have represented countries on things like environmental sustainability and things like that. And then I did debating at university, and now in my current job, I regularly speak and host panels and do presentations and talk, as well as presenting to customers and doing detailed breakdowns of the industry and things like that. So they all tie together and then also tie into this podcast. So if you're thinking, maybe I've got my own podcast, maybe it's not worth it, I don't have that many views, think about the other benefits that you'll get out of it. Like, I don't make money from this podcast. I do have a Patreon. I have one subscriber. I used to have more, but the thing is, the things I initially promised that everyone was promising, things like, oh, I'll help you do deck techs and things like that. I realistically just don't have the time or the energy to help people on that angle. So now, rather than having a multi-tiered Patreon with ability to gain access to me as a competitive player to help you win, which I originally thought was going to be in Fab, instead I just have a look, if you like what I'm doing, chuck a couple pounds my way and I'll keep doing it. But I'll keep doing it anyway because I like doing it. The only real thing, podcast ramblings, that has disappointed me is just the number of people that have watched my history of competitive Fab video, but I kind of knew that would happen. Like, you need a few videos in a series for that kind of thing to really take off. Like, people don't just watch a lot of it in one go. But if that is something you're in history of competitive Fab, the first video, which covers 2019 to 2020, is on my channel. In its own. Second video is being worked on, but I'm kind of busy. And then just talking more broadly, I mean, like, I'm doing a lot of creative stuff. I'm kind of having a bit of a creative renaissance, which is actually really good for me on the background. I am still going to finish that Fab fan fiction that I was working on, though it might end up not being Fab related by the end of it, because actually I'm quite enjoying the story. So I might be defabifying it and actually just trying to edit it into a final novel. I'm also working on a series of short stories, which is quite interesting. I'm currently exploring in writing the space of digital substitutes for things that are not possible in real. That's what I'm exploring at the moment in writing. So, for example, that's like getting your serotonin not from completing, work in a factory or woodworking or things like that because you can't afford the wood, but getting it instead from like TikTok videos or playing games, right? Getting your rush not from gambling or poker, but getting it from gacha. Not being able to build own an actual property, but owning, property in a computer game. Not being able to actually farm because you live in a flat in a city, but playing Stardew Valley. Those kind of things. So that's what I'm currently writing, which I find to be a very interesting topic. Sorry, we've gone completely off the topic of Fab, so I apologize for that ramble. But kind of as I said, like, one of my goals for this podcast going forwards is to keep talking about Fab, but also to put it in context of the other things that are happening in my life that I think people might find interesting. Because those kind of things influence how I currently view the game of Fab. So, like, when I talk about how much I'm traveling for work and I talk about the other writing I'm doing and how I'm creating more space for more creative projects, really what that means in terms of how much practice that I get at Fab and how I engage with Fab completely changes. And that's why I wanted to talk through this story and put that in context. And for those of you still listening, my engagement with Fab at the moment is probably never been lower, but my enjoyment of the game has potentially never been higher. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I'm playing roughly a game or two a day. I'm, copying meta decks. I'm not really innovating or doing that much myself. I'm just kind of doing what people are doing and figuring out why they've done it, which to be fair, has been my strategy most of the time, but I'm not really innovating. I'm not really playing that much or practicing that much. I'm kind of going to the ProQuest. Like, I went to the ProQuest last week with maybe 10 games because I've been traveling. Before I went in, I still went 3-3, but again, as I said, I feel like it could have been 5-1. Like, I feel like there were certain things that if I'd just done slightly differently, they would have gone for me instead of against me. And I feel like, that feels good. And also, like, in the background, just so you're aware, like, I've sold out of the majority of the game. Right, so if we think about heroes I used to be able to build a deck for, I could build Bolton, Teklo, Max, Levia, Riptide, KO, Azalea, Prism, Kasai, Kano, Rhino. I could build all of these decks. Currently, I am capable of building this deck, most of this deck, this deck. Right? So currently, I'm only capable of actually building 4 of the decks on this list. 3 even. 3 of the decks on this list. I've sold my Aether Wildfires and a lot of the other Kano Majestics. I'm in the process of selling all of my Mechanologist cards. I've sold quite a few of my Ranger cards. I've sold all of my Brute cards. And Warrior cards, I only really have the cards for Olympia, which let me build certain versions of Hatchet Dory, but not actually every version of Dorinthia, because I don't have things like Glistening Steelblade, which I refuse to buy. So I've also taken my financial investment in Fab, and I've even considered selling things like my EA Tunic, because I don't, I don't have as much. I still love the card, but it's also just sitting there being like, this card is worth £4,000. I could do a lot with £4,000. I could do a course. I could put it into investments. I could put it into my mortgage fund. All these kind of things. So my engagement with Fab from a financial standpoint and from a like how invested I am in the game standpoint has never been lower, but my enjoyment is higher because I've taken a lot of that pressure out of engaging, trying to win, having to play the most meta deck available. I'm actually kind of comfortable. Comfortable's the wrong word. I'm actually kind of happy where I am, being able to build one of 4 good meta decks rather than being able to build 5. Because previously in ProQuest seasons, I've been, will I play Azalea? Will I play KO? Will I play Prism? And it took me ages to figure out what deck I'm going to play. As we are, I'm going to play Victor because I have the cards for Victor. I could potentially play Dorinthia, but I don't really want to. Didn't really want to play Katsu because I think Victor's a better deck into the field. But that removes a lot of angst in terms of picking a deck and playing it. And interestingly, I'm seeing a lot of push from other people on Twitter and Discord and things like that are coming more and more into being specialists. And one of the interesting effects that this wide meta FFG, LSS keep talking about, this wide meta. Oh, look how many heroes are winning ProQuest. Look how many heroes are doing well. But one of the effects of that messaging, which I wonder if they are considering the knock-on effects of it, is that people are feeling more enabled to play specialist heroes and classes. And what that means in practice is that I don't feel like I'm pushed to maintaining as wide a stable of classes, because if the meta is going to be so wide and there are going to be 8 tier 1 and tier 2 heroes, I don't have to maintain that level and that breadth of heroes in my own collection. Because as long as there's some good overlaps, I could theoretically borrow a tier 2 deck from someone else, or I can just, keep that rolling. And it will be interesting to see whether that does start to affect box sales at the end, because it might, right? I'm not saying it will, but it could, right? Because if someone like me who used to order cases is now just being like, well, so for example, I used to play Illusionist. I played Prism at 1 Pro Tour, ProQuests, all that kind of stuff. I used to play Assassin just for a bit, but I have a full Assassin collection that I've been selling off. And I still play Ninja. Ninja has a cool place in my heart, right? So I, previously would have been fully invested in Myst, right, when it comes out, especially because it's Mysteria themed. I love, Japanese and Chinese coded art, and the whole set aesthetic of Mysteria with the moon and the wind and the waves, everything like that is me, right? Mountains, sea, sky. Those are my 3 favorite things. And growing up on the west coast of Ireland, that was 3 things I had a lot of, right? So Mysteria is the perfect set for me. In terms of both classes, I find Illusionist and Assassin very interesting classes. And obviously Ninja has a soft space in my heart, right? So that should be a shoo-in. I should be buying cases. I'm not, right? I've been selling off a load of cards. So actually what I'm doing is just building store credit with a store, and I'm just going to buy singles when that set comes out. Right now, secondary market exists. The store is obviously buying the boxes that I didn't buy before, or that I would have bought before. But it is still interesting to think, if we do keep promoting this message of wide meta, do what you want, that kind of thing, we will end up in a situation where there are more specialists, and those specialists are more encouraged to buy singles and less encouraged to bulk buy product. That does create a bit of a question mark feedback loop as to how much product is being sold. And it probably will get folded into the overall of like more singles stores, more actual people playing the game in new countries like Japan, etc. And will continue the game to grow. I'm not saying it will make the game fall off. I'm saying it does create an interesting dynamic whereby maybe a lot of people's engagement with the game is changing. And obviously, a lot of people are still maintaining a full stable of cards. I know people who are still full collectors of every set. But I am seeing more and more this narrative of maybe I'll just be a Ranger player, or maybe I'll just be a Guardian player, or maybe I'll play, a lot of people are saying, what's my aggro hero, what's my control, what's my aggro class, what's my control class, and my mid-range class. And that's what I've done, and that's what people are doing. So they're saying, okay, I'm keeping Ninja for aggro, I'm keeping Illusionist for mid-range, and Guardian for control, for example. And they're doing that. They're saying, okay, I'm going to take this hero. I reckon Ninja's a safe bet. They'll always have a good aggro deck, right? And then they're picking what they think is going to be the best control class. Guardian is a good bet for that, right? And then a mid-range class like Ranger fits in there in the middle. And then you have 3 playstyles. And once you have those 3, you really have to ask, like, when a meta comes around, like, how many decks do you really have the time to play? So I have only the time to play a game or 2 a day. That means that I don't have time to play 5 different decks to figure out which one I want to play. I'm going to start with the one that's already in my collection. Maybe the 2 or 3 that are already in my collection. I'm going to see how they fit into the meta by just playing some random games, seeing what their power level's like. If they really let me down, I can go to other people and, borrow cards, or I can buy into a new deck, right? With the money that I've saved by not maintaining a full stable of heroes every set. That's my logic, and that's my new approach. And the reason that I talk so much about what's happening in my personal life in terms of travel and, other forms of creativity is that I'm choosing actively to give those more time. But I would say that my engagement with Fab is better. And also, like, you have just one final thought, like, you have the, like, the League of Legends, like, practice effect feedback loop, right? Professional League of Legends players play a lot, but there's a good mid-range of people who are good at the game. Not me. I'm terrible at the game. And one of the best pieces of advice they give to those people is practice. Not all practice is the same. Practicing constantly is not actually the best strategy to get better. It is better to play 2 to 3 engaged games of League of Legends per day rather than playing like 10 and getting tilted or playing on autopilot at the end, because then you're not noticing, you're not learning, and you're not improving. Same does apply to Fab. Unless you're capable of just, like, it's your job, it's all you have to dedicate energy to, you have all this time, you can just play, and you're playing with other people, like, in an engaged manner the entire time because you're all engaged and there's the whole feedback loop. You're actually better off just playing 2 games a day and playing them really, like, analytical, being like, let's make this choice and that choice. I think this is the best way to play that matchup, etc. And you'll end up learning a lot more. So that's where I've landed. And it also reduces the amount of time investment, which is very important just in terms of everything else. It's just an interesting discussion point. Like, ongoing engagement with the game, I do feel like is changing. And that is being fueled directly by what we talked about in the first segment of this meta, which is the ProQuest meta, right? It is directly fueled by those two, right? The fact that so many heroes are viable, the designers are doing a great job balancing the game, combined with, the fact that you can specialize in any of these heroes, combined with my personal circumstances, but also circumstances shared by a lot of people where Fab can't take that much investment all the time, is leading to more specialization, which is in turn leading to a more varied meta. And we're in this very, very interesting and delightful feedback loop, actually, in that kind of situation. So I think it's great. That's what I'm going to leave it with. As always, Patreon does exist. If you want to give me, I think the lowest tier is £3 a month. I post on there sometimes with thoughts that I don't post up on here. But most of the time it's just to show your support for me. Shout out to Dan Vanderberg, my only Patreon. But there are others. There could be others. There have been others in the past. And as I said, I don't really do these videos for profit. I am quite content with my job and my line of work, but I enjoy doing these videos as a hobby. And you see that in the results that come out. And I need to make sure I'm speaking to the microphone. If I cut out sometimes, I'm really working on getting the audio quality in. All right, cool. Speak to you all and have a good one.